Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Tanya Sadowski. I am the program coordinator for the Global Engagement Department here at the Community Solution Education System, and I would like to very much welcome you to today's GLOBETalk. Today's topic is a South African perspective on leading experts. This video is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel after the presentation, so you can always come back and revisit this presentation at a later date as well. So the Community Solution Education System Global Engagement Department brings GLOBETalks to everybody, to our community on a bi-monthly basis. We are, as a system, committed to preparing innovative, engaged, purposeful agents of change who serve our global community. Our global engagement team works to bring this mission to life by providing leadership, infrastructure, and support for internationalization throughout the community solution community. We're very passionate about creating learning opportunities that have a positive impact on our global community. Our GLOBETalk series is part of our global engagement mission and provides virtual year-round discussions to introduce our community to thought leaders in higher education, experts on key functional areas, best practices, and the diversity of ideas necessary to expand our own internal strategic thinking. Before we begin today's GLOBETalk, we'd like to go over a few tips for best accessing this session. We do ask that you please mute yourself during today's session, but feel free to use the chat box for any questions you may have that will be answered at the end, or any reactions you have throughout the presentation. We do also recommend keeping your video off in the interest of conserving bandwidth. As the speakers presenting, we will be monitoring the chat box. We do have a lot of time at the end for Q&A, but feel free to pose your questions or comments throughout. We also very much request your patience. As we all know, technology can be challenging sometimes, and we will do our best in the event that anything happens. Should there be any issues, all GLOBETalks are recorded and available on our YouTube channel after the session. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome and introduce our featured speaker. Professor Dr. Marianne Louw is Cornerstone Institute's Executive Dean and Academic Head and Chairperson of the Senate. Cornerstone Institute is a private university in Cape Town and has been a partner institute of the Community Solution since 2018. Her academic career spans 20 years across 2 public and 2 private higher education institutions. After being awarded a BA Communication and then a BA Honors Communication degree at the University of the Free State, she became a journalist at a daily newspaper in Johannesburg. In later years, she also served as editor and managing editor for various national magazines. Her academic career started at the communication department of what is now the University of Johannesburg. During this time, she co-authored the first comprehensive South African textbook on interpersonal communication titled Let's Talk About Interpersonal Communication, which has since seen 4 additional editions. While running her own training business in the late 1990s, she completed her Master of Philosophy in Human Resource Management cum laude from the University of Johannesburg, as well as a certificate in life and business coaching from the VIP Institute. In the early 2000s, Dr. Louw joined what was then Monash, South Africa, a campus of the internationally recognized Australian-based Monash University as head of communication and media studies. During a time of ownership transition and organizational restructuring, she served as acting executive dean of the School of Social and Health Sciences, playing a key role in maintaining organizational stability and academic operations. Dr. Louw is a Doctor of Literature and Philosophy in Leadership Communication. She has co-authored and contributed to various textbooks and academic articles. And in 2024, her book, Leading Experts, How to Bring Out the Best in Clever Team Members, based on her doctoral and subsequent research, was published. And now, without further ado, I would like to turn this table over to Dr. Louw. Dr. Louw, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tanya, and thank you so much to GLOBETalks. I really appreciate the invitation, and I'm so excited to be here with you all, in spirit and in technology, if not in flesh. And yeah, let's hope the technology will serve us throughout this session, but I'm really looking forward to our discussion. I'm going to share a screen with you. I just want to make sure if it doesn't, I'll tell you when it's up, and then you must please tell me if you can't see it. Okay. So, yeah. So I'm going to continue, as we said, talking about leading experts, how to bring out the best in clever team members. And I'll explain in a moment what a clever team member is. In my recent research, or well, originally my doctoral research on interpersonal leadership relations, I specifically looked at the leader-follower relationship. So many people do research in terms of strategic leadership or leading the masses or leading an entire organization. And I felt that we need to pay more attention to the leadership in a particular small context, because that's where the real leadership, I think, happens and develops. So that was the focus of my research then and since then. And if you look at the systems theory, and you look at the leader-follower relationship as a system, then its suprasystem or its environment would be the organizational environment in which this leader-follower relationship functions. And these days, it's very often a knowledge-based organization or environment. We've moved away, as we all know, from manufacturing and those industries, which we still have, but we've moved very much to a knowledge-based era and a knowledge economy. And that brings more than the usual. We've always had challenges in terms of leadership, many of them. And that's why today, after hundreds of years, we still talk about leadership. But when you lead an expert follower, someone who might know in their specific field of expertise, who might know more than you do as the manager, then it becomes quite tricky. And I was fascinated with that topic, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. This is just a very simplified version of the general model that I put together originally. And it's all about the system of the leader-follower relationship then with its environment that influences it all the time. And then with your two individuals, because I basically just looked at the two, the leader and the follower, and the symbolic interaction or the communication that happens between them. Symbolic interaction comes from symbolic interactionism, which is a theory on communication that I find extremely interesting. It says that there isn't a pre-existing reality. We actually create reality through our communication. So through the way that we relate to one another all the time, we create particular realities in our relationships, and of course also in our organizations. So an organization is more than a building or a legal contract or whatever. It's actually a social institution that people have created through their communication. So this was all very fascinating as I went ahead and studied all of this. So I looked at all three layers. I looked at the environment, and I looked at the relationship itself, and then I also looked at the individual leaders or followers. Before I go ahead, I need to just explain about leader-follower in my model. Usually we talk about leaders or followers, and I do talk about leaders and followers in the sense of explaining who in a particular situation is the person who influences or who is being influenced. But I like to talk about leader followers as one term to show that they are actually functionalities that are interchangeable. if I'm a manager in a particular situation, I don't always lead, especially with knowledge workers or expert followers. They might know more than I do in certain situations. For instance, if I'm the executive dean, like I am, if we talk about the entire institution of Cornerstone Institute, and we talk about our strategic goals in terms of faculty, then I would lead. But if I have, let's say, a lecturer in education, like I do on this very call, and we talk about the curriculum for an educational program, that person would know more than me, and that person would lead me in that situation and not I them. So, as Petros Malakian also said so eloquently, I think, someone leading all of the time seems to be ineffective and unnatural. The positional leader may allow others to lead, which may prove to be more effective and efficient. Thus, if one is not and cannot be a leader at all times in all situations, then the concept of a leader as a noun does not exist and seems rather a myth. The mythical concept of a leader results in dangerous and toxic leaders, and we've all seen them, obsessed by its fictitious glory and fame. Leadership followership processes occur in relationships, and leading following functions are exchangeable behaviors in human relationships. And that is a core truth in the research that I have done and that I've read that other people have done. So firstly, to look at the environment, and I was looking for markers in the environment, according to my research participants, things in the organization that support good interpersonal leadership relations, because we want the leader-followers relationship to be strong so that it can support the knowledge retention and transfer and creation and sharing that we want in a knowledge-based organization. We don't want silos. We don't want people leaving through retiring or going for another job and taking their knowledge with them and leaving us in a lurch. And that's also why it's so difficult, number one, but also expensive to replace people, especially experts, highly knowledgeable people. So we want that. We want a strong relationship that forms the basis for knowledge sharing and knowledge creation. So since you are on the free plan and not the paid plan, I'm just joking. I'm just going to share one aspect of the environment that I looked at that got revealed through my research. And that was a supportive leadership concept. Now, a leadership concept is the general way in which leadership is done in an organization. So it's not a particular person's leadership style, but more the culture of how leadership is being done in a particular organization. So it's a broad trend or a broad culture of leadership. And so according to my research participants and other research, a supportive kind of leadership concept really supports good interpersonal leadership relations. And this consists of a few things, and I mentioned 5 here. The first one that was very, very important to my participants is communicating openly and transparently with followers. It's extremely important. People really have the need to know what's going on. If we think about what a large part work is of our lives, and there are so many things at work that influence us and the way that we live, the quality of our very lives, the quality of living. So that I don't want to not know these things that are happening out there that will affect me and the quality of life for me. So people are very serious about their need for open communication and transparent communication. And I've seen in so many cases how leaders want to seemingly manage information and massage information and just not give all the information immediately. No, people must be given little tidbits that they can process and handle at their level of work or maturity. And I think most of it is nonsense. Sometimes there are good reasons why we're not sharing something, but in many cases, it's just silly, or it's about hogging the power. You know, knowledge is power, and you keep people in the dark, and it can actually become toxic. The next one is accommodating followers' needs, and this is about meeting individuals in your team where they are at. So you might have people with physical disabilities. You might have parents and non-parents, and their lives are different and contain different challenges. You might have someone going through an emotionally traumatic time, and all of those people need to be given a bit of leeway. It's basically meeting the human being, remembering that we are not machines working in the workplace and just ticking along, on an endless battery, but that we actually have home lives and personal lives and hearts and emotions, and accommodating those needs. And in my own experience, and some of the experts that I consulted and have had interviews with, that actually, if you do make accommodations for people in the workplace, maybe let someone go a little bit earlier in the day, or letting them work from home during a particularly difficult time or whatever, then you always get the reward of that, from that, in terms of loyalty, renewed commitment. Those are the kinds of people who often will walk the extra mile with you and for you, because you were there for them when they needed you. The third one, I hope, is self-evident: giving followers sufficient resources to perform at their best. It's not always possible for all of us. Some of us have, well, all of us have limited budgets, and there might be other challenges and limitations, but to give as much as we can to people so that they can do their jobs. And of course, this also includes the information that we mentioned in number 1. And then number 4, affirming followers in their strengths. I think sometimes we are like lazy lovers as leaders. We think that if we've complimented someone in the team once, you do presentations so well, or what a nicely written report, that's enough and that'll last for ages. But really, if you think about all the negative information that we are exposed to, just in life in general, but also in organizations, challenges, system glitches, client and customer complaints. There's so much in a day's work that often goes wrong, and that's negative, that people are sometimes starving for affirmation and a compliment, and sometimes just a thank you. Then number 5 was a very interesting one that my research participants really emphasized, and is allowing followers to make mistakes. And once again, in the workplace, we sometimes think that people are not supposed to make mistakes. And I don't know how you can put people and no mistakes in the same sentence, because we all have known that for many centuries, that to err is human. To be human is to make mistakes. And we are going to do that. And that's going to happen at work too. And one of the experts that I interviewed talked about celebrating mistakes. And I so loved this, because it was not just, she didn't say allowing or tolerating mistakes. She said celebrating mistakes. She said, and she's a very well-versed coach, trainer, facilitator, consultant with various organizations on transformative leadership. She says, I work with organizations that have a very supportive, accessible organizational culture. Although they are high-performance organizations, and I do want to highlight this, because sometimes we think that if we are more lenient, all the productivity and all the efficiency will go out the window, and people will just sit around doing nothing or making mistakes. But you can have a high performance organization, and allow and celebrate mistakes. She continues, there's also a great deal of openness between leaders and followers. It's the kind of culture that says it's okay to make mistakes, we celebrate them. How can we use that mistake to learn so that we're more effective when we revisit a similar situation? And that is what you want to do in a knowledge economy. Going ahead to the next section, which is the leader-follower relationship itself, I just want to go back to one little part of the model that I showed before, and it's about the symbolic interaction between the expert leader-follower, who may be a leader at some stages and a follower at other stages. Now, this symbolic interaction has more than one aspect to it. The one is informational, and we often focus on this, especially in the workplace. We focus on the literal content of communication, and that's important. If I give you an instruction at work and you are my team member, of course it's important for you to know what to do and how you're supposed to do it. That's the information. But actually, there's another part that's much more important, and that's the relational aspect. And especially in this context, it's so much more important than the informational part. And I want to explain a bit more about symbolic interaction and then specifically relational messages. Symbolic interaction is how we continuously interpret one another's communication and then respond according to what we've understood. So the meaning, and this is important, I taught communication from the age of 23, and it's now about 5 or 6 years later. And I've always told students, and I learned this first from Tubbs and Moss. Anybody who ever knew the communication experts, Tubbs and Moss, I had that. I had them as a textbook, and they said meaning is not in words, and I've been preaching that for many years. It's not in words; it's in the responses that we mutually evoke out of each other. Our interactions then become part of the relational context, so they form the relationship, and they limit future behaviors like moves in a game. If let's say you play chess and the one person makes this move, you have only so many moves with which to respond, and the further the game goes, the fewer your possibilities become in responding to this other person. And like the moves in a game, ultimately communication defines the relationship, and in a very real sense, even the people in the relationship. And if we look at relational messages as opposed to informational messages, it's not the what, but the how that we communicate. And these messages comment on our relationships. This is all relationships, not just the leader-follower relationship at work. So these relational messages tell us, this is how I see myself, this is how I see you, this is how I see you seeing me. So if you think of tone of voice, how abrupt someone comes across, or how tender or caring they come across, it's just in all of the how in which we communicate that sends the relational messages. Sometimes even the literal content. If I give you an instruction, then not only do you have the information of the instruction, but the relational, one option for the relational message is that I feel that I'm in a position to give you an instruction. I feel that somehow you are subordinate to me, or I am more important than you, therefore I can give you an instruction. It talks about the relationship between people. And so to be able to collaborate well in the workplace, we have to understand the people around us in terms of their intentions, and we have to respond appropriately. So in terms of what my research participants felt were constructive relational communication behaviors, I had 4 main categories that I identified. And each one of them actually formed a dichotomy with a corresponding negative or destructive behavior. But the positive ones are on the screen: respectful communication, active listening, supportive communication, and considering followers or the leader's input. So these are what builds constructive interpersonal relationships. I'm going to, once again, because you are on the free package, only discuss some of them today. And let's look at respectful communication. On the destructive side, the opposite of respectful communication is aggressive communication. And I'm not going to give definitions, but rather use quotations from my participants to give you a real feeling. And I'm sure that many of you in this room will be able to identify with some of these quotes, and you've experienced the same. So aggressive communication was experienced extremely negative by research participants. The one said, "My leader treats other people disrespectfully and talks down to peers and subordinates." See, peers even, not just subordinates. "His behavior communicates to me," that is the relational part, "that my opinion does not matter and that I'm only there to do his dirty work, which he subsequently brands as his own without adding further value." On the respectful side, the better side of the coin, another participant said, "My leader is respectful, friendly, makes me feel secure and part of a team working together and building something good, gives purpose and validates the work we do, encouraging." Now that is what you want to hear from a follower. Let's also look at considering the other's input. The opposite, the destructive opposite, is blocking the other person's communication. And here I'm sure that some people will be able to identify. This participant said about her boss, her male boss, "It is his way or the highway. It takes much effort to change his mind about things. He's very set in his ways. And his attitude is," because he doesn't literally say this, "comply or live with the consequences. Just do what's expected of you. Try to make as few waves as possible." On the constructive side, if you consider the other leader followers' input, you get a situation like the one that another expert described to me that I interviewed. It's no longer, in this knowledge economy, a situation of you are the boss and followers must do as you say. It's far more collaborative. They bounce ideas off you and you bounce ideas off them until you find a solution that will work best. Knowledge workers are experts with very good ideas. That really leads to a much better quality product. So once again, that's what knowledge work is about. It's not about one person and one person's expertise or ideas. The more, well, they always say, they have said for many ages, 2 heads are better than one. Now, 3, 4, 5 heads that are extremely knowledgeable, imagine how good that would be. So that is what we want in a knowledge-based organization. Finally, the last level is the level of the individual leader or follower. And here I looked at, on the one hand, values that my research participants felt were the types of values that enhance leader-follower relationships, and then also competencies. Once again, on the free plan, only a little taste today. So the key value that most of my participants spoke about was honesty. And they had different words for it to mean more or less the same thing. Integrity sometimes, ethical conduct, transparency, things like that. But what they meant is, where you're on or off with this person. Another type of language would be, this person is a straight shooter. You don't wonder what this person is thinking. You never think that they're manipulating you. So, and the participants felt that this kind of, what this did, this value around honesty, if you have a leader or follower that values transparency and honesty, this builds in the relationship trust, because I feel that I'm hearing the truth from you and that you're not hiding things from me, things that affect my life, and that you would share with me if there's problematic behavior on my side in the workplace, and that you would help me and guide me and not sabotage me. Of course, when you have that kind of trust, it also facilitates collaboration, because people cannot really collaborate if there's no trust, because then you wonder the whole time, is she going to steal my ideas? Is he going to sabotage me? Are they going to take credit for my ideas, etc., etc.? And conflict resolution, which was also highlighted as an important aspect in my research, and that happens wherever there are people. Conflict is not a bad or an evil thing. Where there are people, there are conflict. But when there is honesty, and from that transparency, there's trust, then it's also easier, and this many participants have mentioned, easier to resolve conflict. Then the key competency, once again, there were several competencies, and one of them that I won't be talking about today was EQ, emotional intelligence. And I know I saw Dr. Basil Leonard, who's an emotional intelligence expert, specifically emotional leadership. So he would really appreciate that it was one of the strongest points to come forth from the research. But the biggest one that people mentioned, and mentioned with passion, was listening skills. Now, I've known for many years the importance of listening skills, but it is and remains one of the most underappreciated communication skill. When people say that person is an excellent communicator, what do you think of? You don't think listener, you think speaker. Wow, that person surely is a wonderful public speaker or extremely charismatic or whatever. But good communicator is usually in our minds good speaker. But we actually do more listening in our lives than we do talking, except for a few of us. And if we can sharpen those skills, and it's so important in our relationships and in our leadership, it will really stand us in good stead. So here's what came from my research, a few things, a few ways in which you can demonstrate this competency to strengthen your leadership relations. Be fully present with your leader or your follower. And I'm thinking immediately of a coffee appointment I had with a colleague the other day where I don't think I was fully present. So, and that's always, it leaves a feeling of not, a bit of dissatisfaction, and it's a bit jarring. So if we can't be fully present with people, we should rather postpone the meeting or say to the person, listen, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me today, or I'm stressed about that, but it's so important to be fully present and to then listen calmly and collaboratively. So many times people, and that includes our team members, tell us things that we don't want to hear. And some of these things might even be personal in terms of we might take it personally. So it's not always easy to listen to these things, but still to remain calm and open to what you're hearing, and to have a solution-focused approach, and not, I want to find what's wrong with what you're saying. To consider the speaker and the context goes back to accommodating your various team members at their level and in their circumstances. Sometimes a person is going through something, and the way that they treat you has to do with that. It's not making it right. It's just understanding better where they're coming from. And sometimes there's a context where something might seem offensive or a bit abrupt or whatever, but it is not necessarily in the context. As long as our listening skills is not just about hearing, it's about that interpretation part, interpreting the relational messages. And to follow up on issues that were raised, even if you had a quick informal discussion in the hallway with a team member and they raised some issue and you said you would do something about it, then do something. Follow up and follow through. In conclusion, based on a lot of research, some of it my own, I have defined constructive interpersonal leadership relations, specifically in a knowledge-based context, as a process of symbolic interaction between two expert leader followers who mutually influence, sometimes being a leader, sometimes being a follower, each other and share meaning to strengthen their relationship, to form the basis for them to collaboratively share, create, and apply knowledge to achieve organizational goals. And that is where we want to get to. We want those strong relationships, but not just for the sake of, although I think that is already a worthy goal, but to collaboratively share, create, and apply knowledge to achieve and exceed organizational goals. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Louw. This was absolutely fascinating to me. Thank you so much for this talk. Wonderful. If anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand or put them in the chat. We would be, I'm sure Dr. Louw would be happy to answer any questions or have any comments from any of you. No, I don't see anything. Must have covered everything well. Are there any resources you'd like to share where people can get more information or, or that you think might be helpful if anybody's interested in learning more?
If I can access the chat in a while, I can maybe just post a link to my book, which is a collection of other resources. I won't remember the individual resources now, but there's yeah, it's like a library of other very useful sources that I've found very helpful.
That would be wonderful. Actually, what I can do is if you want to send me that link, I can send it out with the video link to all of the.
Okay, that might be easier.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Excellent.
Thank you.
We do have a question. Is your book available in the United States? Is it available for us?
Yeah, it's available from I think Google Books.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah, so it's should be available across the world.
Wonderful. Excellent. Just a couple of comments in
Thank you, Luanda.
Yeah, there's a wonderful session. Learned so much. Absolutely. Great insight. Thank you so much. This really was very insightful. Wonderful. Great. Excellent. Well, thank you all again for joining us today. And again, a very, very heartfelt thank you to Dr. Louw and your expertise. Thank you all for joining us. Please keep an eye out for future Globe Talks, and we will hopefully see you all very soon. Thank you all.
Thank you for hosting me.